From the very morning, Emma knew that this day would not be easy. She woke up determined to clean and put her thoughts in order, not only in her apartment, but also in her mind. Her husband, Tom, was snoozing beside her, reviewing the last dreams of the night before, his hand on her arm, and she was fed up with his endless suspicions and questioning since they were married. It had been 2 years now, and with each passing month his jealousy only grew stronger. While discussing work matters then, Tom would not even go outside to hurry his wife, but simply watched from the window and was tormented by suspicion. Since then, he had sincerely believed that Emma had someone on the side and that she was changing lovers like gloves, skillfully hiding traces of infidelity, although not even close to it, even in thought. But how could she prove it? Obviously, he was simply afraid of losing her. With his behavior, however, he was only pushing her away. She was preparing for a divorce. Internally, she had been ready for it for a long time. But first, a general cleaning as a symbol of renewal of life. Let this apartment be ready for her new, free life, without Tom and his mother, whom he constantly dragged into his quarrels. She always took her son's side, never even considering justice. Margaret had been giving Emma a hard time for some time now. After feeding herself breakfast, she sorted through her old clothes, throwing them away and hanging clean curtains. Emma busily dusted all surfaces, doing so with great pleasure, imagining that each stroke of the rag or broom brought her closer to freedom. In her head, she was already making plans for a new life, a new job, traveling, parties with friends, and most importantly, her next partner would not be jealous and would appreciate her as a woman, meeting her from work with flowers. "I'm still okay. I can still attract men," she thought, fidgeting in front of the mirror. She could do her makeup, but then Tom might have another jealous attack if she wore it at home. She imagined Tom's screams. Cheated again. Who is he? Tell me where he is. Emma sank deeper into her thoughts, replaying in her head the memories of the last few years she had spent with Tom. She remembered the early days of their relationship, when everything had seemed perfect and Tom had been loving and attentive. It hadn't always been that way. Tom had made her laugh, surprised her with little gifts. They'd stayed up late talking about their dreams and plans for the future. But at some point, everything changed. His possessiveness grew slowly, like a creeping vine that eventually strangled everything around him. It started with innocent questions, where she'd been, who she'd been with, but over time, questions turned into accusations, laughter into silence, and gifts into apologies after arguments. "It's all getting tiresome," Emma thought. "Tomorrow I'll file for divorce and let him live the life he wants. At least we don't have kids," she thought, working tirelessly, so much so that she didn't notice the time fly by. Cleaning dragged on all day, and before she knew it, it was evening. The apartment had always been a symbol of their life together, but tonight it was turning into a symbol of her independence. Every dusted shelf and every neatly folded item made her feel more master of the situation. Emma hummed softly as she worked, and her mind swarmed with pictures of a brighter, freer future, a future in which she wouldn't have to look over her shoulder or explain herself to anyone. Meanwhile, Tom was driving home from work, tormented by thoughts that Emma was hiding something. Lately, she often stayed home alone all day without calling him, and when she did, it was only on business. She had grown cold, not like a wife, but like a distant stranger. He remembered their wedding day, how radiant Emma looked, her smile full of hope and excitement. He wondered how they had ended up here, with this gulf between them. But instead of reflecting on his own actions, Tom turned again to suspicion. He couldn't escape the thought that Emma was slipping away from him, and the fear of losing her only fueled his paranoia. Tom called his mother Margaret. She had always been his biggest ally. "Mom, she's definitely not home alone tonight. I've got a hunch. Let's go quickly. We've got to catch her red-handed," he said into the phone, barely suppressing his anger. "I'm on my way, son. I'm on my way," Margaret replied, anticipating another fight. She enjoyed confronting her daughter-in-law. She had always thought Emma wasn't good enough for her Tom and considered it her mission to prove it. Margaret thought a daughter-in-law should be modest, stay at home, and wait for her husband. Emma's makeup, short skirts, and job as a dispatcher for a male-dominated taxi company had always annoyed her. Margaret met Tom at the driveway, and with quick steps they headed for the apartment. Tom, realizing the urgency of the situation, kicked the door with his foot, bursting into the apartment. "We know you're not alone. Admit where he is," shouted Tom, rushing inside, followed by Margaret with an equally determined expression on her face, clearly ready for betrayal. But what they saw made them both stop short. Emma stood in the middle of the living room with a huge garbage bag filled with old clothes, papers, and socks. The apartment was incredibly chaotic, but at the same time there was a sense of order. The floor was littered with boxes, bags, and rags, and a dusty lamp dangled menacingly from the chandelier. Emma turned to face them, her expression expressing weariness and determination. "Oh, I didn't expect you two to be together," she said quietly, but there was reproach in her voice as she glanced at the door, which now hung slightly ajar, creaking on its hinges. Tom and Margaret froze at a loss for words. They had clearly expected to see something quite different, a lover escaping over the balcony, or at least the remnants of a romantic dinner, but instead they saw a tired Emma busy cleaning up. "That's me," Emma continued, raising an eyebrow. "Believe me, no one helped me. I'm in charge of general cleaning, and if you don't like something, you can help," she added, looking at her husband defiantly. Margaret was the first to come to her senses and turned to her sister-in-law indignantly. "So you mean to tell me you've been cleaning here all day, alone?" she asked with suspicion in her voice. "Yes, can you imagine, Margaret? Alone?" Emma nodded with a note of sarcasm. "All alone. Although, to be honest, I could use a little help. Maybe you and Tom could vacuum or at least take out the trash." Tom stood in the doorway, trying to comprehend the situation. He was so sure he was going to catch Emma cheating, but instead he got the offer to vacuum. He looked around the room, noticing how diligently Emma was cleaning. The apartment looked different, as if Emma was trying to reclaim it for herself. Guilt overwhelmed him, but he quickly pushed it away, grasping at his fading suspicions. "Why haven't you picked up the phone all day?" he finally muttered, still clinging to his suspicions. Emma looked at her phone, forgotten on the couch under a pile of rags. She picked it up. "Oh, really missed calls from you. Sorry, I couldn't hear. The vacuum cleaner was making too much noise, and frankly, I didn't have time for it. But you know," she said, giving him a sharp look, "you could always enter the apartment like a normal person, with a key, not by kicking the door in." Tom was embarrassed, his aggressive mood dissipating into an awkward fog. He looked at his mother, hoping she could somehow salvage the situation. Margaret, however, gave Emma a disgruntled look and then turned back to her son. "Son, she's hiding something. Why else would she be cleaning so intensely? What is she trying to hide?" "Trying to get rid of junk, Margaret," Emma replied calmly, gesturing around the apartment. "Maybe you and Tom should add yourselves to that pile. You've both been pissing me off so much lately, and I have plans for a new life, without the jealousy scenes and kick-down doors." Margaret gasped as if she'd been given a mortal insult. Tom looked even more confused, but finally managed to murmur, "What do you mean, without us?" "It means I'm packing my things. Probably yours too, Tom." Emma smiled, her voice taking on a new firmness. "It's time to make room for something better." "Emma, you're crazy," Margaret exclaimed. "Who else would put up with a husband like Tom if not you?" Emma sighed, her voice becoming calm and determined. "Someone will, but not me. Now, if you want to help, please take the garbage bags or kindly remove yourself, and take care of the door your son kicked in." Tom looked around the apartment, his mind clouded with confusion and regret. He had never imagined things would turn out like this. The reality of losing Emma suddenly seemed all too real, and he realized that his actions had consequences. Margaret was at a loss for words. Emma's strength had taken them both by surprise. There was something different about her today, something relentless and determined. Emma continued cleaning, her movements deliberate, each stroke of the broom feeling like another step toward freedom. She didn't look back at them, focusing on her future. A future where she was in control, where she could breathe without the weight of unnecessary suspicion and possessiveness. Tom and Margaret exchanged glances, and for a moment they thought they realized this was no longer their home. Emma had taken it for herself and was ready to make a fresh start, with or without them. "I'll contact you about the paperwork," Emma said, her voice flat. "But right now, I'd appreciate it if you both would leave. I have a lot to do." Tom opened his mouth to object, but immediately closed it. He nodded slowly with an expression of defeat on his face. Margaret, still hissing, tried to protest, but Tom gently took her hand. "Come along, Mother," he said quietly. "We have nothing more to say." As they left, Emma took a deep breath, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. The apartment belonged to her again, and with it, her life. She smiled faintly, already imagining the possibilities of a new beginning, a life full of hope, free of the poisonous shadows of the past.